Good afternoon, Honorable Chairperson, distinguished speakers and delegates. It gives me immense pleasure to extend to you a very warm welcome at the 27th Convergence 2019. Our next session is on migration to IP, the big paradigm shift. The chairperson for the session is Mr. Peter Bruce, Director APAC, IABM. May I please request sir to briefly introduce our speakers for the session and take over the session. Thank you.
Good afternoon. So I know this is a tough session after lunch, so hopefully people can stay awake. And so firstly, my name is Peter Boosah. I work for the IABM, which is a not-for-profit trade association. So very importantly, like fake news or whatever, you have to know the source of the information, where it's coming from. So I work for a trade association. I don't have anything to sell to anybody because we represent the member companies. So let's kick it off. And as I say, we have to know the source of our information. So, okay, Sushant, right? Who is Managing Director of South Asia, India for Harmonic. Certainly worked for some very interesting companies such as Cisco, VideoSide, Dolby, Vizati, Benchmark, and has 24 years experience, it says, within the media technology domain. So certainly have an excellent perspective as he also sees, let's say, outside of India and the whole region of where we are. So, Mr. N.M. Mehra, it says here, a known face and professional in the industry. Certainly a very known face. I won't read out the whole list here, but joined the industry in 1973 and has worked with Doordarshan up until 2005. He has certainly contributed very much to the broadcast development in India over the years. And at present, he is contributing for adoption of new technology for the content production and broadcast for the Indian broadcast industry, government and private. And also he is Vice President of VTI, which is Visual Technology India. So thank you very much contributing again. From last year you were on the panel, so we very much know your some contribution that you'll have. And finally, last but not least, of course, Parag Kamani, very much from the end user side. And I won't read a whole list of stuff, but I'll abbreviate. Certainly been in the industry 27 years, it says here. Also with a lot of, let's say, starting the industry and probably still working on the audio side. And he's working for Nirvana Digital, which really helps in terms of the IP and the IP working and the workflow, distribution, and the contribution side to the industry. And so certainly will give us some very good insight into what is perhaps needed, what is there, and what is available in terms of IP. So what I'll do is that I'll quickly do a presentation on where we are with IP, and IP means quite a few different things to different people. So I'll just go up to the podium and we'll... So the session is migration to IP, the big paradigm shift. Now, as I mentioned, IP means quite a few things. And what are we actually talking about when we talk about IP? So, and where is the confusion? So what I'll do is I'll just lay the scene and explain where we are with IP, but effectively start with quite a few questions perhaps we've heard in the last few years about people's, could be misconception or questions of moving to IP and why are we moving to IP. So when I talk about IP, we really talk about three areas. So file-based activities. So since probably the profile, if you've worked in studios, about 20 years ago, we were using IP. So IP is nothing new. We were FTPing files, video files. We've been working in studios, with file-based workflow already. So in the last couple of years, there's been quite a lot of emphasis and push about IP. There is IP delivery, so we will also talk about that towards the end. My main focus at the moment of this presentation is about the production and the facilities and how the move to IP, the final part of the puzzle within the broadcast and media chain, will allow the full workflow all the way to the home. Then there's also a set of IP which is being used as a backhaul where you're sending the video, maybe instead of a satellite or a cable link, you're actually just doing it over IP. So I'm going to focus on the IP production side. Okay, IP, and when you talk about IP and people talk about the internet, people talk about computers, IP delivery isn't the same for production, and when we talk about delivery, we talk about delivery to the home. And many people ask, well, I wouldn't use IP because it's not the 5 nines. In other words, the security level and the amount of errors is not up to scratch. I can't trust that IT stuff. So why would we go to IT? There's no standard in IP. So unlike SDI, perhaps, what is the standard? It's too complex, it's too complicated, it's available to attacks. So these are a lot of the perhaps discussions people have, and perhaps some things you need to mitigate. Anyway, why bother when SDI works absolutely fine? So, we're going to talk about initially this studio stuff, right? And let's go through all of those points. When we talk about the security over IP, and I'm going to talk about SMPTE 2110 and certain standards, this is not, when I'm talking in the studio, I have managed networks. So this is not the OTT, perhaps where the signal goes bad, and you're not guaranteeing the signal. So we can guarantee quality of experience, but also quality of service within our IP when we're under a controlled network. So we use provision and groom networks. So much like an SDI cable is very well controlled, we're using IP at a high level of control that we have the security there. We can say, oh, we can't trust that IT stuff. IT stuff crashes. Now, don't get confused between the consumer level and the enterprise level of equipment. So at the enterprise level equipment, you have the quality that you need. Additionally, when you're talking about things crashing, you're talking about usually peaks in the workflow of which this is controlled, depending on what signal you're working with. So I'm going to talk about the standards and where we are with the standards. If you are looking at moving to IP, you're looking at a new studio, you're looking at moving signals, what do you have to understand, first of all, are the standards that are out there at the moment. So, beginning of last year, SMPTE 2110 was ratified, I think it's the beginning of last year, of which the standards have changed from the SMPTE 2022 of the original IP standards, which encapsulates the whole video, audio, metadata together. So, what you can all do is go online, Google JTNM Roadmap, which is a group of standards bodies working together with a defined timeline of what will be rolled out and what is happening. So when you look at this map, the way to look at it is from the bottom. The darker the signal, or the darker the color, or the darker the area, means it's being adopted. So in other words, what is happening is SDI at the bottom is getting lighter as you go towards the end. So we'll work from the bottom of the slide up. And what we're also saying is that SDI will have a long tail, but it will be phased out over time. So if we look in, okay, we're talking about IBC 20, 2020, 24, 26, then it will be phased out. When we look at the standards, already we have ratified and accepted standards ST 2022-6, which encapsulates the whole video, audio, metadata workflow, and this is already in operation. So if you have a point-to-point signal that you want to move, this would be the most proficient way of sending that whole signal. The issue has, let's say, come with that, if you like, so that is really a direct replacement of the SDI cable. So if you look at the first slide, that's exactly what that is doing. Now, to be more efficient, and when we talk about IP, and we talk, let's say, about routing an IP, if it's a router, for example, we're not talking about how many switches, how many cross points, we're talking about bandwidth. So the issue with SMPTE 2022 is if you're not using audio channels, it will still use that same bandwidth. So when we move to the IP domain, from beginning of last year, SMPTE 2110 has several different substandards which allows you to break out, and we will go through this in a few other slides, allows you to break out the video, the audio channels, the metadata, so that, for example, if you're just sending 2 audio channels down an IP chain, that's the only bandwidth you're using. So that gives us more flexibility and allows us, we mentioned UHD, but going up to UHD, or allows us to have, let's say, an SD, an HD, a UHD channel all down one line. Then we move up, and what is starting to be resolved, so next slide I have a few lists of where we're going, is system management, automated provisioning. So in other words, if you can plug in a cable, it will know that that video, what type of video it is and so forth, kind of an auto-detect. And then we start to talk about cloud, effectively going forward, and open APIs. So the cloud fit, and this is what is to come, will allow on-demand, scalable, elastic, meterable, let's say, working, and allow, if you like, a unified standard for us to work in cloud. Within that, there's security, there's the cloud infrastructure which has to be put in, also the APIs, and different clouds could be public, private, and also could be different levels of quality. Then non-media specific, we're talking really about software only, in other words, virtualize, and how those boxes, perhaps if you're looking at purchasing some kind of video box to do something, how we will just virtualize this in the cloud. Of course, part of the benefits of moving to the cloud is that the IT industry is so much bigger than the broadcast industry, so COTS, which is off-the-shelf hardware, will allow us to bring those costs down. There's also 2 main subcategories to the standard bodies, which AMWA is one of them, where they're looking into tally. So you'll be able to, down the same signal, send a video signal and then have tally, identifying, timing, so PTP timing. So have a look at PTP timing when you're looking into IP, because this is very, very important in terms of replacing that old SPG. So the argument that it's too complex. What IP is giving you, and initially, if you're a traditional broadcast engineer, it approves complex. Of course, when you come from the IT domain, that complexity actually works in your favor, which gives you flexibility. So one of the main, let's say, spin-offs and advantages, down one line, you have firstly bidirectional, and you can send multi-channels, multi-signals, metadata in both directions. So as we talk about effectively the end consumer, we can see why people are watching, where they're watching, where it's gone wrong, and so forth. SDI cannot do that. So the new standards are easing the complexity. So is IP real? I was just asked, are other systems implemented yet? So we have now hundreds of use case of IP systems out there. So these are just a few. What I'd like to do is just highlight just one, because I know the chief engineer very well at Arena TV, who's in the UK. And look at the date. This was actually going back 2 years ago, where Arena now have something like 6 trucks all IP. Okay, one of the enabler of IP, which is really pushing IP moving forward, is high density HD channels or UHD channels. And when I asked the chief engineer, why did you go IP, especially a very early adopter, when 2022 was just first recognized, his answer was this. We had, firstly, an OB truck. We have tons of signal. And in this case, in this first truck, it was 12 UHD cameras. At that time, to move UHD signals around was 4 SDI cables to actually switch. The switcher and the router would not be big enough for them in the truck, and the whole weight would not allow the truck to be built. So this was their way of, they can actually move to UHD and have big UHD trucks. And this first one, which is a 12 camera, he's got something like 24 camera trucks. So the routing, as I say, what you'll start to hear is a few different terms. In terms of routing, what we're talking about is not number of switches, we're talking about bandwidth and your bandwidth availability. So these are some of the changes that are going to happen. Okay, from the IABM we do independent surveys, and we survey people going to NAB and IBC. One of the things, and this is going back, would be the beginning of last year at NAB, why are you going to NAB? And the respondents, and what are you looking for, very high on the list was routing and networking. For the large broadcasters, it's right at the top, and all respondents, they're looking at the routing side, which is one of the key areas. Then IBC, it was right at the top for the majority of people going to the shows, the international shows. So why transition to IP? So what has happened effectively is that the bandwidth of IP, where before, when we went to, for example, HD, the bandwidth of the IP routers were not fast enough to cope. They have far exceeded the bandwidth that we can actually route even with UHD. So when we talk about the technology inefficiencies, routing multiple signals down one cable has given us that great advantage. But not only that, it's allowed us to move to HD, UHD, or multiple HD signals down a single cable. So keeping it efficient, networking redundancy. When you look at the IP, and there are levels of IT people get confused about. And I talk about, you know, my switch at home. It's connected with a $10 adapter. I live in Singapore, so I go to Simlim. That switch goes down because the adapter doesn't work and it's fused. I go and buy a new adapter, it costs me $10. But my level of, let's say, security means I can be down for half a day or a day, before the whole family complain, but they'll probably complain, but fine. I can live with that. In your office security, you may have one IT person who's trying to keep the office IT running. That system goes down, and he's basically got about an hour before really people are going to complain and push to him and say why emails aren't working. And they're going to ask immediately, but he's got an hour, which is fine. We know that for broadcast, that is not acceptable. So the level of redundancy, we cannot, as broadcasters, go to the level of banks or the level of military, which is far above the broadcast level. But we can't afford that and have maybe data centers on 3 different continents or whatever. So the redundancy, the level that you have as a broadcast level on the broadcast supply side, will ensure that you are on air and you have redundant paths and you keep on going. So in terms of technology, you just have to invest in the right level of security that is valid for your business model. So, but what it also gives you, a big advantage in terms of scalability. Okay, India, I don't think there's many, if any, UHD studios running. But what it allows you to do is put in an HD studio and be UHD ready when you need it, because it's just bandwidth. So it gives you that scalability, and it allows you very easily to scale up if you've got more studios, if you are working even in HD. The next thing is really going to be the virtualization and cloud. We'll touch on that a bit later. And geographically allow, and I heard that there's some projects going on at the moment of remote production in India. It allows you to be geographically away from your main hub or your main system. So there's several ways to go. So we should also, if we look at the move to IP, firstly think about how we're going to do it. So by far, if it is of course, if it's a new site, you're going to go IP. It doesn't make sense building an SD studio at present. If you already got a studio and you're moving, then hybrid is the way to go. So that's what we're mostly building today, is hybrid systems. Integrates the SDI peripherals with the IP core and vice versa. The routing side is getting faster and faster, but this will allow you to have flexibility. Allows you to work and adjust your system as you phase out the SDI, maybe studios, or it could be an area where you're sending to transmission and the transmission going out. So IP and SDI will continue to live together, and it's going to live together for some time for sure. There is going to be a long tail to SDI. So what we have to understand is, with 2110, all the streams can work separately. So if you're learning about, let's say, working with IP, you have to realize that the SMPTE 2110 standards, and learn what they're about, where the video can work with the audio and the metadata can all work separately. So this is where you would work with a hybrid system. Of course, you can start with HD, and then you are prepared to work with UHD at a later time. IP doesn't constrain the growth of your system, and that's a real key thing of your investment. So if it is a greenfield site, yes, it would make sense being fully IP. And if it's an existing site, it would make sense that you are hybrid. So here's a very simple SDI system. What you may consider is upgrading in terms of the core switch to IP, where you could then easily add other cameras, perhaps on different studios within your system, and then assign them when you need them. Or it could be the integrated router side, which is then changing to IP. So you have a core, actually IP system within your working. Monitoring is very easy to move to IP. And what it allows you to do is send down few cables to your NCR or whatever your final transmission from that core system. So I'm not saying also if you have a simple SDI project and you have a 3-camera system that is never going to move to UHD, it is SDI, it is fine. And I understand that because you can put it in, install it, it will work. But if you already have a system and you're looking at increasing for that system, you can then go in a hybrid, or if it's a fresh greenfield site, you can go IP. And certainly if you're looking at moving from maybe SD suite to HD, then I would consider IP. The main thing is to understand the streams and the connectivity and how that works. So if we look on the left, we have SMPTE 2022-6, which encapsulates everything: audio, video, metadata. SMPTE 2022-6, we can have just the video, but remember you're taking the whole system. So this is where SMPTE 2110 takes out the metadata, takes out -20, takes out the video, and -30 takes out the audio. So the audio is effectively an AES 67 stream. So if you've got an hour, go online and you can read all about these standards online. And then it's a matter of mixing the different standards depending on what their operation is. So if it's to the final transmitter, 2022, which encapsulates all the video and audio, would be a more ideal way to go. And then you've got different -30, which would be the audio area. So take your time to learn about the different standards, what you can mix and match, how you can mix and match. There are now set in place PTP timing, which allows you to gen-lock and SDI timing feeds with your system. So learn your way how to, or wrap your heads around multi-streaming and how that works and how the different segments work, and how you would set your system up more like an IT system than a broadcast system in terms of, you know, a core mix or whether you have leaf and spine mix. So understand the different families. So we have basically the differences: SMPTE 2110 -20 is uncompressed video. 21 is a compressed video, still not being ratified yet. -30 is the audio, and then -40 is your data. And then there are standards coming out with tally in the future. So what we're going to do is talk with the panel a little bit more about the other opportunities of IP. But when we look at any given technology, it takes the functionality, the benefits are initial, and then effectively it flattens off. So where we're at the moment is 2110 for the last, 2022 for the last 2 years has already been implemented, is already being used, and systems are out there. Effectively replacing that SDI cable to an IP cable. We are effectively mid-area on the curve there, where 2110 is now being implemented, and that's giving us more functionality to our system. The end game and where we are moving to is virtualization and the cloud. So in other words, basically it will go to the cloud, maybe your own private cloud or public cloud, depending on what type of operation you're running. And where we are is in 5-10 years, you will not be able to go to IBC, NAB, convention like this, where you'll be buying boxes. It will be IP. So 10 years from now, let's say, and it's a matter of when you decide to move, it will be virtualized. So understand what virtualization means and how that's going to work. This will also affect your business model, because maybe if you need, you have a sporting event, you need for 2 weeks some kind of application, you may rent it. You may pay as you go type applications. So the idea, once we virtualize and move to cloud, of you owning your own bit of hardware is going to be changing. So effectively where we are at the beginning, where the target is IP-based infrastructure, we're talking about software definable solutions and networks, to pure virtualized deployment. So this is what we're going to discuss today with the panel. And that facility will be in the cloud. It doesn't matter where it is. That facility may be a pile of Dell servers, and it's the applications and it's the objectives of what you want to do in your production within that. So finally, what you need to do is ask a lot of questions and learn. How does SDI, IP hybrid fit the picture? Does it fit for me? Do I go full IP? How do I move to IP? There will be challenges, particularly in the staffing and training, because there's a different skill sets moving to IP. Will we just have a big data center? Will that data center be remote? Will it be outsourced? Is my interest in remote live production? So already this is being implemented and it is happening. I think Star Sports is one of them who are doing it in India. Understanding what devices will become virtualized and how I will work with those devices. What is inside my gateway and how I'm going to work and route and guarantee my quality of service and system. How will my back panel look like? Maybe it'll just look like that, and that's all it's going to do. So, over to the next speaker.
Good afternoon. My name is Sushant. Thank you, Peter, for laying the foundation for this discussion. A few answers to those questions out there. Yes, we have solutions that are software defined. Yes, we have solutions that are virtualized, deployed today. And how would the back panel look like? I won't be able to see it because it's as a service in the cloud. All I would be seeing is content being sent somewhere and the end result being given to my consumers. So the back panel is being handled by somebody else. That being said, I'd like to kind of wear my devil's advocate hat for a moment or for a few more minutes and talk about why SDI is here to stay for a little longer. I would support your case there where you said SDI is here. SDI has a long tail and it'll remain. For a few moments, let's kind of step back and look at the big picture. IP has already been rolled out. We are using it today. Our entire entertainment existence is on IP. If I look at the entire content chain, all the way from acquisition to consumption, there's just one link in that entire chain that is yet to shift to IP. And that is the one we're focusing on, which is the production area. If we talk about content acquisition, we've always had VSAT links for the ages. We've always had fiber links. Now we have backpacks to take our video from a remote location to our central site. So that's on IP either which ways. It's always been there for a long time. We then come to the content delivery piece. We've got cable, we've got our digital terrestrial, we've got our IPTV, our DTH. That's any which ways an IP. The back end or the infrastructure over there is IP based anyways. very little is SDI. And then is the content consumption piece. Our phones, our laptops are all connected to IP connections, and that's how we are getting OTT and web consumption patterns, and all that is IP. Now the only piece that is left in, and what Peter talked about, is the production piece. Now if you look at the standards that Peter talked about, SMPTE 2022, the SMPTE 2022 family, except 5 and 6, everyone talks about the compressed IP domain, which talks about the MPEG-2 transport stream, which means IP delivery. So the only thing that's left inside there is 2022-5 and 2022-6, which is in the uncompressed domain. The next step now, the new standard that he showed in the 3 graphs, was the SMPTE 2110, which encapsulates this uncompressed, moving to high definition with video, audio, and timing and metadata to be dealt with separately. Because in our legacy domains, we've always had a separate video cable, stereo cables going separately, control RS-232 cables going elsewhere, and the other data cables doing something else. Also, in this region, I mean, while Peter talked about a global perspective, let's get a little local about India. In this region, we've just completed a cycle of digitization, or digitalization, as we call it. Be it in our cable domain, our cable industry colleagues are here. They've just done the entire DAS rollout. Our DTH was always there in the digital domain. We've had HD TV sets in not very large numbers being shipped. Are we ready for UHD today? The whole driver to IP is UHD. Are we ready for that? I mean, how many people in the country, if I looked at 170 million television households, how many of them would be ultra high definition television capable? Even if I said 1 million or 2 million, that would still be a very small amount to focus on and change my entire underlying infrastructure. At this point in time, there are channels that are broadcasters who are still making the shift from standard def to high def. Ultra high def is another quantum leap for another time in this thing. A crucial point that Peter just talked about and glazed over was manpower readiness. Some of our customers, when we raised this topic of IP deployment, said that I have a cable guy who's in the PCR or in the studio ready to switch cables on the patch panel, who is only 8 standard educated, and I pay him a princely sum of 20 rupees. Sorry, 8,000 rupees a month, right? Imagine I do the switch to IP. I now have to have an IT engineer, not going to work 12 hours a shift or 14 hours a shift like the cable guy would. So now I have to have 4 guys, 1 for each shift and 1 for backup. And now these guys are IT professionals, so I have to pay them IT salaries. So how is IT again, or IP, going to make me more efficient? Or how is it going to bring my OPEX down? How is it going to become more, how should I say, future-proof? Patch panels, like Peter said, is going to be, we used to have the SDI patch, the audio patch with our XLR connectors, and we used to have all the IOs going in and out. Now, if I take away the SDI router and start talking SDN or software defined networks, and I start talking about network for virtualized, network functional virtualization, it's going to take a long time for our manpower in the country to make that quantum shift. It is upon us to train them, and till that time, SDI is going to stay. We also have a strong ecosystem of SDI on the broadcast networks that still haven't achieved return of investment. So that has to get through as well. That cycle of finishing or getting the most out of our equipment that we purchased, let's say 2 or 3 years ago or 4 years ago, still has a long way to go till we can dispose that off and make the next shift to new technology. The price points for an all IP ecosystem today is slightly prohibitively expensive, relatively expensive in India. And hence, the economies of scale that have been there in SDI are not available here, and therefore is a kind of impediment for someone to move or take that shift to SDI. And last but not the least, I mean, on why SDI should be here a little longer, is that we had one standard for SDI, which was the recommendation 601M for SDI signals. Now, as Peter talked about, there's an entire table of the SIMT 2022 family, the SIMT 2110 family, and there are standards that yet need to be standardized or accepted as a standard. So, and by that time, we're going to have products also ready based on that, and then proven in the market for us to buy. Nobody wants to be a pioneer in something like this. It's difficult. So, more often than not, SDI will stay a little longer. That's one part of my spiel. The other part is where I remove my devil's advocate and look at it as a technology evangelist, is that hybrid is the way to go. I can't be an Sdi Island totally. When we set out in the year 2000 to design a new television channel, a news television channel, it had a file-based workflow which was very different from the old VTRs and switchers, the video editing systems of old. These were where the editing would be done on a computer, connected over Ethernet to a central storage, and then played out from that editing system to another IP storage, and then on air to an encoder. This was way back in the year 2000. And after that, all our news channels have adopted that. I mean, out of the 340 news channels that we have, approximately 340 news channels that we have, 300 are still in the IP domain. The other 46 still need to move to the IP domain. They still have to get that advantage of the IP technology. There is a business need by the content owners to distribute their content through OTT. And this need will drive them to adopt IP workflows for the same. Today, if I did it with my legacy SDI chain, it would be extremely difficult to do that. So I have to have an encoder in there, I have to have a stream solution in there to then take that signal out of the box and move it to somebody else's CDN or somebody else's servers. And that is the first shift towards IP. UHD is another point that Peter talked about. This is the angel speaking. That was the devil's advocate. This is the angel speaking. More and more HD panels, more and more UHD panels are being sold today. And if you go to Lajpat Nagar and talk to the LG guy out there, he kind of says that I'm selling at least 40 to 50 UHD 4K TVs in 3 months, which is a lot more than what he used to do 2 years ago, which was maybe 2 or 3 a month, right? So people are buying better screens, they expect better quality, and therefore that to a point will then drive broadcasters and content owners to start pushing content to India, which is ultra high def. Netflix today gives me an ultra high definition subscription if I so require, if I can afford it. It used to be 2,000 rupees a month compared to 650 for high def subscription, but right now they made it at 800 rupees. Not too prohibitive, but let's utilize that 4K panel that you've got at home adorning your wonderful wall in the living room and show you what it can do. Netflix has kind of brought their rates down. That has created another kind of avalanche effect with other content owners saying, if they can, we can too. And we're now seeing a lot more 4K content or UHD content being created in India, but it's certainly not coming over satellite. It's certainly not coming over my cable network, not my terrestrial, but it's coming over OTT. That is my shift to IP. And of course, like we were speaking with Peter before this thing began, a certain large broadcaster in India decided that when you're covering sports and a lot of locations, you had to send crew to each of these locations, set it up, rig it up, connect it back home for all the cables, the signals to come through. Now they decided to go all IP and remote production. So only the cameras are plugged in there with the camera guys going and placing it in the 16 locations. IP cables come back to a network point which comes to the center, and you have the guy who's doing local commentary sitting in the head office. You have the switching guy sitting in the head office. You have the audio mixer guy in the head office, the graphics guy in the head office. So instead of taking all of these people to different stadiums across the country or different stadia across the country with IP, have brought all of that and centralized it and had a minimal amount of infrastructure move from location to location. I presume with this exercise they've kind of saved 20% today, and there's a long way to go in them. If they use more and more IP, they could bring down their costs a lot more in a couple of more years. One way to get to IP, like Peter talked about, was to create an island. If you have a new project, if it's a standalone project that you need to put up, or if you have a new bureau to start off, or a new program to begin, see if you can begin that with IP. Let everything else be SDI today. You've invested in that, you're not going to throw it away. But start that little island, that production island in IP. It gets your manpower across the spectrum, across the entire chain in your organization to get used to the issues that they will face today and they can address and resolve in the years to come. Then there's the interoperability between the SDI island and the IP island. Those are also issues that they can address and figure out, educate themselves, overcome with solutions. We at Harmonic have hybrid devices that today you start off with an SDI video server or an encoder, and if you wanted to do IP tomorrow with, let's say, SIMT 2022-6 or SIMT 2010, then you upgraded it with a little license, right? And you were then in a hybrid domain where you had a few inputs coming in SDI and one or two inputs coming in an IP. Now from here, once you've acquired this content through either IP or SDI, after that it flowed seamlessly through the entire chain till it reached the consumer. So that's one way to do it. The other way is we have compressed video servers that actually take an IP in an MPEG-2 transport stream, process it in an application that could generate revenue for the customer, for the broadcaster, by placing it in their remote locations and then giving them content for that particular location. A use case could be that I have this server sitting in South Africa, in the US, in Australia, or in Singapore, and my content going from India has a certain set of ads going from here, being transmitted. At that stage in each of these video servers, those ads get replaced with local ads, right, and then are distributed to the subscribers. What that does is that when I've adopted this IP domain, I now have multiplied my revenue from one ad break by the number of times, by the number of servers I have deployed across the world. So IP, a hybrid IP approach is possible to do. Another solution to achieve this functionality, if you want to go from, let's say, SDI to IP, is move your workflows to the cloud. That's the easiest. You do not have to change much infrastructure on the ground. And to address Peter's point, yes, an IP domain in the cloud, virtualized, is deployed, is proven, is functional today, and is making money for our customers. And the good part, it helps save a lot of money on technology on the ground. So you're saving on storage space, rack space, electrical, you're saving on power, aircon, manpower, etc., etc. So an all IP workflow on the cloud is possible, and this transition is going to take very little time to achieve. So for quite a lot of us, we went from a black and white television straight away to a flat panel. So it's easy for us to make this transition from, let's say, our SDI domains all the way to a cloud domain in an affordable manner. So thank you very much. This is my first spiel. Maybe we come back and I answer more questions, or I kind of parry with my panel members here. Thank you.
Thank you, Sushant. So,
Thank you, Peter. Myself, Mehra, and Narendra Mohan Mehra. I'm from Visual Technology. Yes, Peter and Sushant has already spoken a lot about video over IP. Now, as I can see here, there are not many broadcasters as such sitting here, but certainly this is directly related with the broadcaster. So I'm putting my point from the broadcaster's point of view, that how the IP will take us forward. If I look back to the history of television, and if I restrict myself to the signal media transportation, that is uncompressed video or media, then media over IP, I rate it as the second most important paradigm shift which the industry has seen. And as most of you will recollect, the first such change was from analog to digital, that is the SDI. Certainly it will be a game changer. Certainly it will bring a big change in the workflows, approach to the television content production and distribution. IP as a broadcaster is nothing new. IP benefits such as greater flexibility, low cost, and widespread availability are widely acknowledged by the broadcaster. And they are already using, as Peter and has already stated, that broadcasters are already using IP networking for contribution links, IP controls, monitoring, file-based workflows, and now recently inducted in last 2-3 years that IP intercom, IP distribution, networks, IP audio, linear OTT video, etc., etc. But that all is based upon the compression coupled with the delay, latency, synchronization related problems. Those are the pain points there. But what we are talking video, uncompressed video over IP, as Peter has stated and given the details about it, that it is secure and latency is almost negligible, and it allows auto synchronization of all the signals which are carried in the stream. As I look the coming time, in the coming years, with the implementation, as more and more implementation of the ST2110 will take place, the cameras, switchers, router, multi-viewers, MCR switchers, glues, may not be looking the way or may not be functioning the way they are at present. Their outlook will change, their function will change, they may not be the same as they are today. A good example I can put to you, production switcher, thank you, which is today based upon ME concept. But probably if we go for the video over IP, it will be based upon the layer concept. Already some equipments are already available in the market based upon this very concept. And if I look forward, not only the remote sports production, I look forward that automation may come because of video over IP in the news, supported by the AI. It may come even in the sports production also, because it will be very easy to couple it with the softwares and switching and bring the effects in that. Certainly, this change will bring many more changes. Complete replacement of the baseband by the IP workflow will certainly open Pandora box in the future. If I look to my country today and think about how the IP implementation will be happening here, there are about 100 broadcasters and about 80 TV channels, 800 TV channels. And out of that, only 10% TV channels are HD TV channels. Rest all are SD TV channels. We know HD was inducted a long time back. We have seen, may I have it? We have seen that adopting the new technology in India is not happening that fast. That out of 800 TV channel, only 10 TV channel has been 10% TV channels are HD today. So here in our country, we have seen that adaptation of the technology is mostly governed by the economics and the market forces. Excellence of the technology does not drive the changes. A good example is in India, broadcaster brought HD cameras and other equipment to support their SD infrastructure. Why? Because SD cameras or SD equipment was no more available in the market. So, if I look to the IP transition in India, how it will be happening, I understand it will be happening only the same way as it happened earlier with the analog to SDI transformation. That is, in one go, only the new facilities will be changing themselves or coming up with the complete IP systems. But so I'm looking forward, as already my co-speakers have spoken, that IP islands will be formed the way earlier the digital islands were formed. And if I look today, other than the transportation stream for the IP, there is end-to-end complete equipment there are not many complete equipment available which are totally based upon IP as on date. They are only having, I'm going to say, at the output level, it will be transferred into into the IP 20 ST 21 to 10. Otherwise, entire processing even today is based upon the SDI. A hybrid approach is expected in the future. As everybody is concluding like that only, yes, nobody throws his working equipment merely for the sake of change. Yes, market forces, economics, they drive it. And certainly trained manpower is another reason, sorry. Well, I think this trained manpower is already been spoken here, and there is a need for the trained manpower. With this, I will close my comments. In short, would like to conclude, industry is already making best of IP capabilities, but full IP, uncompressed video, live production system at present are very few worldwide, and in India, I think they are being talked about only. It will be taking some time for the greater penetration, adaptation of the IP for the media and signals will start gaining momentum in the coming years. Certainly, benefits of the IP are sufficient to justify the adaptation, and people will be attracted because of those justifications. And sure for certain, I can foresee in the coming many more years, broadcaster will wonder that how they were managed to cope with the multiple incompatible signals with own sets of different type of cable and interfaces and synchronization systems, as we wonder now today that how we were working earlier without email, without social media and mobile phones. Thank you very much.
I'll make reference to the ongoing program and subject extremely brief. I'm just going to divide it into two halves, brief halves. One is I'm going to just speak a little bit about the company I represent, and B is our take as far as IP is concerned, and what the panelists said. So just very quickly, I represent Nirvana Digital, which is based in Mumbai, but we have offices in Hong Kong and in the US. And we are effectively known as a multi-channel network. And at the same time, we also handle rights management, which effectively means that if somebody is utilizing your content, okay, we can prevent that from happening. Just to give you an indication as to how large we are, we manage something like 300,000 videos at this period of time. We have about 50 million subscribers, and in terms of view time, it's about 100 billion minutes till date. Okay, so that's just a little background. Some of our more popular content is a channel known as Spiritual Mantra, which, as the name suggests, is more to do with devotional content. We have more than 2 million subscribers. Then we have Bollywood remains extremely popular as far as India is concerned. So Bollywood Nirvana is our next biggest channel. Children's programming is extremely popular too. So we have a channel called Kid Rhymes. And then, of course, there is the piece as far as lifestyle is concerned, the Art of Living. That's another large channel that we have. Anyway, now just getting into a little bit of facts as far as our discussion is concerned. If you take a guess about how much of video content was being consumed in India in 2012, it was purely 2 minutes a day. Okay, that's because of the high, data costs. And then there was the geo effect that took place effectively from maybe 2015, 2016 onwards. So in 2018, the amount of time that Indians viewed videos on their mobile phone was 52 minutes. And what we perceive to happen this year is 67 minutes, which is huge. And I think a lot to support this transition is going to take place, what we are discussing about today. So at Nirvana Digital, we believe that, yes, it's only a matter of time when the entire transition will take place from SDI to IP. We know that the advent of UHD has occurred, and it's just going to scale up from there. We also believe that it's going to help data centers drive down the costs of the Ethernet. And what Sushant, my colleague, has said is OTT players definitely need to adopt this technology. And not only that, I think there is a need for us to create awareness with content owners and with consumers as to this transformation or transition, how effectively it is going to be in terms of not only quality, but as far as speed is concerned. So I'd just like to end this brief introduction by simply saying that if we can hasten the process of this transition or migration, whatever the definition is, at Nirvana Digital, we sincerely believe that in the next 2 years, India is going to surpass every country globally in terms of the video content that is being consumed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Parag. So, should let him sit down first, of course. Just continuing from what you were saying, first of all, that obviously the benefit of IP is bidirectional. So in terms of the end user experience, I mean, how would you see the benefits are, let's say, as a kind of operator, if you like, of that bidirectional use of IP?
See, definitely it's going to be helpful to us. So if I look at it from the perspective of, being a kind of channel, it actually gives us an indication as to what is being consumed, when it is being consumed, who it is being consumed by, what are the reasons why they are either consuming it, or as the case is why they are not consuming it. We can take those analytics and present it to either the channels, the OTT platform, or even to the content creators, and bring it to their attention that what they perceive is a ideal viewing doesn't necessarily need to be an ideal viewing, okay? Because tastes keep changing, and at the same time, you need to take into consideration what is it that the consumers or users really want, okay? Rather than thrusting upon them what you believe is what they want, okay? So I'm in total agreement that this transformation, this transition is essential for us to really be able to understand what is it the consumer and user really wants, because that's going to have a tremendous impact on your offerings, and it's going to have a tremendous impact as far as the pricing or the costs are concerned. So that's my take.
On one of the standards still to be rectified, and which will happen this year, is things like tally and feedback, metadata feedback. So effectively, what is going to be able to happen is that directly in the gallery, it will understand what the end users are happening in real time, and when they're switching off, why they're switching off. So it's going to really maybe impact, let's say, directly as the production happens.
Because it's going to impact also the kind of content that is being created. Because right now one works on assumptions that this is what the consumer wants, but nobody is really taking feedback from the consumers themselves as to what they really want. So what is going to happen is you have various genres. There are going to be multiple sub-genres that are going to be created once this transformation and transition takes place from SDI to IP, because there is no additional level. It's a straight interaction between the consumer and the service provider about their requirements. That's what we sincerely believe, Peter.
So, Mr. Mayor,
Can I just add to that? Parag was right. When we as subscribers are paying, let's say, 800 rupees or 99 rupees a month to a particular app to consume their content. As we heard yesterday in one of the sessions, none of the OTT operators or none of the OTT providers are making money. And till date, they haven't figured out that why am I spending my money elsewhere and not on them. So the analytics piece that Parag mentioned about is so crucial that once they know what I like, whether I like James Bond, whether I like Jason Bourne, whether I like Jack Reacher, once they see that pattern, then they start recommending more of that content for me and then ensure that I stick with them and not switch to somebody else and spend my money on somebody else. Which is why today most of us have more than 5 apps for content, right? I like the movie on that one, but I also like the music that they give over here, but I also like some of the other content that they're showing there. But they still don't know why, where am I going to spend my money, what do I like to spend my money on? And that analytics is only going to come from a bidirectional channel of communication where, unlike legacy television where I just sent content to you and I really didn't care whether you liked it or not or whether you saw it or not. But in case of IP, when I'm getting to OTT or to the web, I get feedback from your computer, from your phone, from your tablet saying, so-and-so saw it from this time to this time, he paused at a particular place, he skipped over the ads, he likes this kind of movies when it's on a Saturday at this particular time. So that makes recommendations a lot easier, and the feedback going back to the content owner saying, hey, this subscriber or this group of subscribers, maybe 1 million subscribers, like that kind of content, please give them more of that. Not what you think you want to give, but what they want. And that's where the money is going to be spent. So IP is going to help the consumer define where his wallet is going to pay.
Okay, I think we just probably have a couple of questions, but I have one for you. And the kind of elephant in the room is the skill sets to roll out training. Of course, you work for Nordishan and know very much the operations, how TV stations work. So what is the challenge you see in terms of skilling people for IP? Because a lot of engineers have known SDI for some time. And how do we get over that challenge?
You see, if total transformation to the IP take place in a TV studio, then the look and feel of the TV studio will, as I can conceive, will no more be the way it is today. It will be looking more or less like a call center. So I meant to say the requirement of the people or the staff will also be questionable at that time. Probably will not be requiring so many people. As far as the learning process is concerned, you see, a saying is there in the industry, a person who knows the basement can learn about IP, but an IP person is not able to learn the basement. But once this transformation takes place, then everything will be IP. People will start thinking in the concept of the IP. No more in the terms of frequencies and no more in the terms of the bandwidth. They will be treating a pixel, an identity, and bit and bytes will be talked about. And the conceptual change will be taking place. And of course, I don't know exactly how it will be happening. Those who will be switching over or learning more of IP will remain in the job and others will be replacing them.
I mean, there is certainly what we call bridging the skills gap, and it comes from both sides. The IT industry understanding, we use IT techniques like BTP timing that times the video, but it's different working with video streaming as it is, say, the timing on my mobile phone, which is also using BTP timing, which is reminding me that we're running out of time. So it is from both sides, for sure. And, but still, the video techniques is so important in terms of an IP network broadcast.
I will like to add, as you see, we are talking here we are talking only one thing, that is uncompressed video over IP, that is transportation of the video signal. I look ahead of it in the coming time. Once it happens, then probably will be a processor with lot many other softwares, and will maybe the same very box, I'm going to say, as I've given you the example of the switcher. So there may be a lot of auto productions will be coming in. Certainly, as I say, news will be one of the easiest thing to do so. Sports will be another thing to do so. And then remote production. The total the requirement of the OB vans will not be there at all. You will be deploying the camera in the stadiums and doing the production, which has already started in some way.
I'll give you the last shot because we've got to finish at 1:30. So.
Okay. So going back to your question on training, we've always been a very informal industry in India. We haven't had formal certifications which are mandated for employment. It's always been referrals, that he does a wonderful job for live events, he's a wonderful vision mixer, he's a wonderful audio guy, and therefore we shall hire him. This has always been word of mouth and not certification based. The IT industry has been certification based. What is also happening is that now the job of the CTO is being superseded by the job of the CIO because of the move to IP. And now organizations that had a CIO who looked after the enterprise IT part for, let's say, attendance, for emails and the like, and on the other hand, the CTO who looked after the broadcast domain, CIO has taken over, saying that there's more IP now than SDI, and therefore I have more power to spend, and therefore I am superior to you. Now that change is happening. That change is happening. Now you would see people calling themselves less CTOs and calling them more CIOs over there. On your training, yes, IABM can help. There are classes that need to be done to get our manpower, like Mr. Mehra said, to get our baseband manpower, our television manpower, our video manpower to IP. And that's so crucial.
Okay. So we'll just do a wrap, and really I'll just finish off and say this, that if we fast forward 10 years, whole solutions will be on the cloud. The hardware boxes you're buying now won't be there. The question, and this is what any facility has to figure out, of what point they're going to move to IP, because IP is coming. And baseband, let's say 10 years from now, you won't be able to buy baseband kit. So that has to happen, but certainly education, retraining, whether it be IT guys getting into video or broadcast guys getting into IP. So I'd like to finally thank the panel. Thank you very much really for your insightful presentations. And thank you very much, everyone.
Can I add one thing? I
don't
don't
think
think,
the last call.
no, the only one thing which has been missed by that, I don't think there is any competition in between IP and SDI. There is no competition. It is SDI will be fading away slowly. It will be remaining there for a long time. It has remained there, and now it will be remaining for some more time in India, and elsewhere it may fade out very much faster. But certainly there is no competition in between.
No, exactly. Okay, we have overrun, so thank you again, and thank you very much. Do you have questions, of course? Don't be shy.
If anybody is awake, please ask questions. Just to prove that you'll have been awake. Yes. Thank you, sir.
I think VSAT has already adopted IP process. So fast forward to 10 years, it should be VSAT technology more pronounced rather than today's SPI technology. VSAT, I am talking about VSAT.
He said that VSAT is already adopted. It's already IP.
Already adopted, yeah.
Yeah, that was among the first adopters of IP, sir.
Yeah.
From the content acquisition side.
Okay.
More and more we would see, instead of dishes being used, we'll now have a little tower which sends the IP signal to the cloud.
Okay.
And
No, but
That's how it's
satellite
going to
is
be.
also a competitive technology. Satellite.
Yes, it is.
Okay. So already a system or feature technology is there.
Yeah.
Return channel is there. So through return channel on satellite,
Yes.
more IP is coming up. IP
Correct.
is coming up.
We agree.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
With this, we come to an end of yet another very interesting session. I would sincerely like to thank all our panelists and speakers for their valuable time and input. Sir, now I would request Mr. Bruce to please hand over the mementos to our distinguished speakers. To start with, Mr. Parag Kamani, Head Business Development, Nirvana Digital. Can we have a round of applause? Mr. N.M. Mehra, VP Technical, Visual Technologies India Private Limited. Mr. Sushant Rai, Managing Director, Sales and General Manager, South Asia, Harmonic Inc. And it's a privilege for me to hand over the memento on behalf of Exhibitions India to Mr. Bruce.